dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
Jack!
The first time I watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I shuddered when I heard Kevin McCarthy scream in the middle of the traffic. Or those gigantic slimy pods rising up in the darkness. Inside them is a copy of you. But what is even more terrifying is, behind this film, there is also a real nightmare. McCarthy nearly died during one scene shoot. The crew was exhausted because of the brutal filming schedule, and for more than 70 years, the film has still sparked controversy because of one chilling question. Who are the pod people really? Aliens? Or a dark metaphor that Hollywood has never dared to say outright? Let's step into the behind the scenes of Invasion of the Body Snatchers to discover the 15 strangest facts about this classic film. 15. The actor was forced to be naked and immersed in hot latex like a living coffin. Do you still remember those shiny, motionless bodies lying still when the pod duplicates were just forming in Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Those immobile, cold human forms, as if they had just been cast from a mysterious mould. Few people know that to create that effect, the two main actresses, Diana Winter and Carolyn Jones, actually had to make full-body moulds in the state of being naked. The process made me shudder. They had to lie motionless while the technicians poured hot latex directly onto their bodies. The material gradually hardened, tightly encasing from the neck down to the feet. They could not move, could not speak. They could only breathe through a small straw while their entire bodies were completely covered, exactly like being buried alive in a rubber coffin. Things became even more terrifying for Carolyn Jones because she already suffered from claustrophobia. Locked tightly inside the hardening latex mold around her body, she truly began to panic. But what made this experience the most haunting was a cruel prank. While the two actresses were still sealed inside the hot latex, a few technicians knocked on the mold and said that they would go eat lunch first. Dana Winter later recalled that the heat of the material made her body almost unbearable, while the rest of her was encased like lying in a living coffin. And because Hollywood at that time was very strict about nudity issues, the studio ultimately had to use soap foam to cover their bodies in the filming scenes. But for those present on the set, the most terrifying memory was not the pod people on the screen, but the moment when the real actors were truly locked tightly inside the hot mould like a grave. 14. Pod people are communists or McCarthyism? The chilling controversy of 70 years. Right from its release, the film ignited a fierce debate that has still not been settled to this day. Ultimately, what do the pod people symbolise? One side asserts that the film is a warning about communism. In their eyes, those people replaced by emotionless duplicates are the greatest obsession of America at that time. The enemy can look exactly like you, live next to you, but in reality is an emotionless spy. But the other side counters fiercely. They argue that the film is actually denouncing American society itself during the Joseph McCarthy era, a period when anyone who thought differently was suspected, isolated, and forced to be like everyone else in order to survive. The irony is that the people who created the film did not agree with each other. The novelist Jack Finney and the lead actor Kevin McCarthy repeatedly affirmed that they never intended to turn the story into a political message. To them, it was just a thriller about the fear of being replaced. Meanwhile, director Don Siegel admitted that the political layers were almost impossible to avoid when the film was made right at the height of McCarthyism. So for many decades, Invasion of the Body Snatchers has been appropriated by both sides. Anti-communist viewers see a warning about emotionless spies. Critics of McCarthyism see a society that is turning people into identical duplicates. And perhaps that is why the most terrifying question of the film still hangs in the air to this day. Are the pod people truly the enemy from outside? Or are they the image of human society itself when fear begins to control everything? 13. The producer shot his love rival out of insane jealousy. There is one behind-the-scenes detail that every time I read it again, I still find hard to believe. It is not in the script of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it happened in real life, and it directly involved the producer of the film. That person is Walter Wanger. In the early 1950s, he was in a famous Hollywood marriage with the actress Joan Bennett. But then, Wanger began to suspect that his wife was having an affair with the producer Jennings Lang. That suspicion gradually turned into a furious jealousy. In 1951, Wanger went to the parking lot of the film studio where Lang often went. When Lang appeared, he approached and fired shots. Lang was hit by multiple bullets and seriously injured, but fortunately, he survived. The news of the incident spread throughout Hollywood almost immediately. A famous producer shooting because of jealousy was an unprecedented event. Wanger was later arrested and had to serve a short prison term, while the scandal became a topic of discussion for many years. Although he continued to make films afterward, the crack in that marriage never healed. Finally, Wanger and Joan Bennett divorced in 1965, closing a behind-the-scenes story full of drama that even now, when looking back, still makes people see that Hollywood, at that time, was both glamorous and full of very real tragedies. 12. Kevin McCarthy was jealous of his close friend Montgomery Clift just because of one role. Are you like me? I have always greatly admired long-lasting friendships in Hollywood, especially the friendship between Kevin McCarthy and Montgomery Clift. The two knew each other very early in their careers and were once seen as promising young actors of the same generation. But like many friendships in the film industry, sometimes careers make everything complicated. In the mid-1950s, McCarthy was participating in a science fiction film with a fairly modest budget called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. At that time, it was only seen as a B-movie in Hollywood, shot quickly, low budget, and no one really thought it would become anything big. Meanwhile, his close friend Montgomery Clift was given the lead role by MGM in Raintree County, a grand project with huge budget and co-starring with superstar Elizabeth Taylor. That was the kind of role that any actor of that time dreamed of. It is not hard to understand that McCarthy sometimes felt jealous. One side was a blockbuster that attracted the attention of all Hollywood, while the other side was just a small sci-fi film that few people expected. But time has a very strange way of arranging things. Raintree County, when released, did not leave a big impression as expected, and gradually faded into oblivion over the years. Meanwhile, Invasion of the Body Snatchers quietly continued to live on through generations of audiences until it was recognized as one of the classic works of the science fiction genre. 11. Toxic pods really poisoned the entire film crew, nearly died from the smoke. The giant pods in Invasion of the Body Snatchers have always been one of the most memorable images of the film. They lie still, shiny and slimy, as if silently nurturing a human duplicate inside. But what few people know is that these props in real life actually caused real trouble for the film crew. To create the pods, the design team used latex combined with many types of chemicals to make the surface soft and feel like a living creature. When placed under the hot filming lights of the 1950s, this material layer began to emit smoke along with a quite heavy chemical smell. At first, everyone just felt a little uncomfortable, but the longer they filmed, the more stifling the air on the set became. Many crew members began to have headaches, nausea, and dizziness. Some people had to leave the set to breathe, and at one point a member of the camera crew was so dizzy that he fainted right in the middle of a scene. After that incident, the film crew was forced to change the way they worked. Scenes with pods were shot very quickly, the number of people standing near the props was limited, and large industrial fans were brought in to blow the chemical smoke out of the set. Looking back now, one can see that the alien pods on the screen not only made audiences shudder, but for a short time, they truly became a danger to the very people who made the film. The male lead was almost run over by a car for real during the frantic escape scene. There is one scene in this film that every time I watch it again, I still feel very tense. Kevin McCarthy's character runs in the middle of the road, running while desperately shouting that that scene already looked dangerous on screen, but in real life it was much more dangerous. Director Don Siegel wanted everything to be real, so he decided to shoot right on the highway with real moving cars. McCarthy had to dash out into the flow of traffic, running and screaming while vehicles continued to move around him. At that time, he was almost exhausted due to the dense shooting schedule, lack of sleep for many consecutive days, and even had muscle cramps while filming. Just one slow beat or a slight misstep, the risk of being hit by a car was completely possible. Siegel later recalled that he stood outside watching and truly felt worried. The tense atmosphere you see in that shot was largely not acting. It came from the fact that everyone knew the situation was genuinely dangerous. Perhaps that is why the highway running scene still makes a strong impression to this day. When watching it again, I always have the feeling that I am seeing a very real moment of old cinema, when actors sometimes had to gamble with their own safety to create a memorable shot. 9. The director secretly hid a real pod under the female lead's bed. If the pods in Invasion of the Body Snatchers were already strange and scary enough, then the way they appeared in real life was sometimes even stranger. Director Don Siegel was known as someone who really liked to create real emotions for the actors. For him, if the actors truly felt uneasy, the shot would be much more natural. So, during one preparation for filming, he had a full-size pod brought and placed right in front of the house of the actress Dana Winter. Someone in the crew even recounted that the pod was even hidden right under her bed to create a surprise. Winter had absolutely no idea what was happening. When she suddenly saw the alien pod right in her familiar space, she startled backward and tripped over it, almost falling hard enough to possibly injure her neck. This story later became quite a famous anecdote in the film's behind the scenes. Many people think it was just a prank that went a bit too far, but others see it as an example of the very daring filmmaking style of Hollywood at that time. 8. The scream, "You're next," echoed 22 years later. Do you know, more than 20 years after Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Kevin McCarthy unexpectedly returned to this story in a very special way. When the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers was made, he appeared in a very short scene. In the middle of the street, McCarthy ran up with the familiar panicked expression, pointing at others and shouting, "That moment always makes me feel like I am seeing the old character coming back." 22 years passed. He seemed to still be doing exactly what he had done before, running to warn everyone that the danger is coming. But just like back then, that warning seemed to still fall into emptiness. And that is precisely what makes this brief appearance so memorable for those who once loved the original film. 7. Pod people secretly invaded global language forever. There is one very interesting thing that I realized when researching the film. Sometimes, a film does not just stop at the screen, but quietly steps into our daily lives. The phrase pod people is such an example. At first, it only referred to the emotionless duplicates born from the pods in the film. But over time, this phrase gradually became a familiar way to refer to people who live mechanically, lack emotion, or only follow the crowd without their own identity. Gradually, that idea was even mentioned as a kind of body snatcher syndrome, the fear that humans could be replaced or lose themselves without even realizing it. The film's influence also spread to many later filmmakers and writers. Stories about silent replacement, about humans becoming strangers, even within their own society, can be glimpsed in the works of Philip K. Dick. or in films by John Carpenter and Jordan Peele. Looking back now, one can see that the scariest thing about the film is not just the pods. It is the idea that one day humans may still look exactly the same, but inside they have become completely different. And perhaps that is why the phrase pod people is still mentioned even to this day. 6. The strange figure staring at the camera. The secret Siegel took to his grave. I don't know if you have sharp eyes to notice, but in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, there is a very brief moment that made many viewers later have to pause and watch it over and over. In a scene that lasts only a few seconds, there is a man standing motionless and looking straight into the camera. He says nothing and has no clear action. He simply stands there, looking directly toward the audience. The strange thing is that this person does not appear at all in the film's cast list, and many crew members later also did not remember ever casting an extra like that. From there, many different explanations began to appear. Some people think it was just an extra who accidentally stood in the wrong position in front of the camera, but others believe it could be a detail that director Don Siegel deliberately left in, as a small hint that pod people may have already infiltrated among humans. When asked about this detail, Siegel only smiled and did not explain further, and then, over the years, that 3-second moment became one of the behind-the-scenes mysteries that many people are still curious about to this day. The real town Sierra Madre turned into pod hell. What would it happen if a terrifying film like Invasion of the Body Snatchers was shot right in your city? That actually happened to the residents of Sierra Madre, and for many, the experience was not exactly pleasant. During the day, Sierra Madre was just a small, quiet town with familiar streets, rows of trees and simple houses. But when the film crew started setting up the sets and shooting at night, that scenery gradually changed. The lights were dimmed low, the streets became deserted, and the tense shooting scenes made the familiar neighborhood suddenly turn into a place full of feelings of unease. The roads that residents walked every day now looked like a dark maze in the story about pod people. At first, many residents were quite excited when they saw Hollywood coming to shoot film right in front of their homes. But as time went on, not a few people began to feel a bit creepy when seeing their own familiar neighborhood become the setting of a nightmare. Perhaps that is why the film creates a very special feeling. When watching, I always have the feeling that the story does not take place somewhere far away, but could happen right in an ordinary town like Sierra Madre, or anywhere else. 4. The male lead dozed off in the middle of the sleep is death scene. There is one behind-the-scenes detail that sounds both funny and quite ironic when I researched the film. In the film, Kevin McCarthy's character always tries to warn everyone that if they fall asleep, they could be replaced by pod people.
Keep your eyes a little wide and blank. Show no interest or excitement.
However, in real life, McCarthy himself fell asleep many times right on the set. The reason was quite simple. The filming schedule of the film was very rushed, only about 19 days. The scenes were shot continuously from early morning to late at night, causing many people in the crew to have almost no time for adequate rest. McCarthy later recounted that there were times when he sat waiting to prepare for a shot and was so tired that he dozed off without realizing it. Once the film crew had to send someone to shake him awake to continue shooting. The irony is that in the film, his character always tries to keep himself and those around him awake, because just falling asleep a little could mean losing oneself. But in real life, the real exhaustion almost made him doze off in the middle of the most tense shooting scenes. Perhaps that is also why many people, when rewatching the film, always feel that McCarthy's performance is very real. The fatigue, tension and panic on screen were sometimes not just acting, but also came from the pressure of those rushed filming days. 3. The studio erased all humour for an unbelievable reason. When researching the production process of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I learned that the original version of the film was actually not as dark as what we see today. In the script and the early cuts, the film had quite a few humorous and lightly satirical moments. Director Don Siegel wanted the story to have a more flexible rhythm, occasionally inserting light dialogues to relieve the audience's tension. But when the film was taken for test screenings, something quite unexpected happened. The audience started laughing at places that the studio thought should not be laughed at, scenes that were supposed to make people feel uneasy. The executives of Allied Artists Pictures immediately became concerned that mixing humour and horror would make the story lose its seriousness. Therefore, they decided to cut almost all the humorous details in the final cut. That decision later still caused a lot of debate. Some people think that because of it, the film became darker and more haunting. But there are also many who regret it, because they believe the original version could have brought a richer nuance to the story. No matter what, that choice contributed to creating the version that you and I still watch today. A film that has almost no room for laughter, only the cold and uneasy atmosphere that lasts from beginning to end. 2. Theatre lobby displayed real pods making viewers shudder. Just imagine stepping into the movie theatre and right in the lobby in front is a giant pod, like in Invasion of the Body Snatchers. For many people at the time the film was released, that was not imagination, but the scene they really saw. When the film was released, theatres displayed pods made of papier-mâché right in the lobby area. In addition, there were large cardboard cutouts of Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter running away, with the pod people advancing behind them. The purpose of this promotional campaign was quite clear: to make people entering the theatre feel as if they had just stepped into the story of the film itself. The tense atmosphere began right from the waiting lobby, even before the screen lit up. For many people back then, this promotion method was both strange and made a strong impression. The pods lying right in front of their eyes made quite a few people feel creepy, as if the danger in the film had stepped out into real life. Perhaps that bold promotion style contributed to making the film a topic of much discussion at the time of its release. 1. Even naming the film was a battle. And the last thing in today's chain of secrets is perhaps a very interesting detail. The film Invasion of the Body Snatchers almost did not have the name that you and I are familiar with. Originally, according to Jack Finney's novel, the story was called The Body Snatchers. But when preparing for release, the studio realised that this name could easily be confused with the horror film The Body Snatcher. So they began considering many other options. At one point, the film was thought of with names like They Come From Another World, Sleep No More, even Evil in the Night. Finally, the studio decided to choose the name Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Just the word invasion already evoked the feeling of a terrifying invasion that was beginning. Looking back, that decision turned out to be very wise. The name was both intriguing and immediately made people feel the danger spreading, and it contributed to helping the film become an unforgettable name in the history of science fiction. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.